So we're going to talk about today, how can we spend more time recruiting well so that we are not spending time having to correct those mistakes that we
Yes.
recruited the wrong person or we didn't thoroughly screen them. And this starts with screening questions. And
And I love that you focused in on the word strategy because there is a strategy around the screening questions. And it's not just throwing a bunch of random questions out to your candidates, just to bombard them with stuff to fill out. Because we've all aside from, hiring candidates that they're like, this company made me go through all these hoops and it wasn't worth it. And I gave up because they were asking silly questions that had nothing to do with the job I was applying for or the position at all, the company at all, even. So in your screening questions is not the time to ask personality questions like, so do you have a dog or a cat? Like, it's not the time for that. Nobody cares in the screening questions. Like, you really need to be specific and strategic in the screening questions.
yes, because, and we hear about this where people have to do questions and questions and more questions and another assessment and 14 interviews. And it's a little exaggerated, but not really compared to some of the stories we've heard. And that's not the point. The point is not to just beat down the candidates to the point that you weed out some of them, because you might weed out some that could actually be great. It's about being very strategic, because the more screening questions, skills assessments that you do, it also takes your team's time. So you want to streamline it as much as possible so that you're not wasting candidate time, but you're also not wasting your team's time.
Yeah, the point of it all is really efficiency. That's
Yes.
the whole point, is efficiency throughout the process.
All about efficiency. So I think first we'll talk about, when we talk about screening questions, I think it's important to differentiate what screening questions are versus skills assessments. And they're two very different things in our opinion. And this is what we write about in the book and what we consult on, is that both of these need to happen before you even get to the interview stage, which
Absolutely.
protects your time. But you need to have these set up ahead of time. But when it comes to skills assessments, we recommend that happens after the initial screening question. And that can be, it's a whole range, and it depends on what you're hiring for. It's, do you need them to demonstrate computer skills or very technical skills, depending on what the position is. Now, for screening questions, this is where you can talk about your negotiables and your non-negotiables. And some examples I will give of non-negotiables that pop into my head are, like, let's think about, let's say this is a job that occasionally may require you to work weekends, but that's a requirement. It's not every weekend, whatever it may be. Then that's something really important to put on your screening questions. It also needs to be in the job description, and hopefully you've got a really good, thorough job description. But you also want to put that in front of the candidate's eyes again, so that they can check the box. Screening questions, you can do it a lot of different ways. We recommend the simplest and least expensive is to do a Google form. Dump all your responses into a spreadsheet and you can look at it that way. But just a very simple, like, yes, I understand that this job requires an occasional weekend, or yes, I understand that. So that they acknowledge it, because maybe they read it on the job description, maybe they skipped over that part, but then they get to the screening questions. And if that's an issue for them, they will likely self-select out, or they'll click no. And then, once you get those results, this person doesn't meet our non-negotiable requirements for this job.
So important. So important. There's so many things like that. You really need to think through the non-negotiables. If it's nights and weekends, you need to, if they're flexible with their hours, can they commute? Can they, all of those things that are non-negotiable, especially in today's world when there's remote hiring and all this happening. Is this ever going to be a remote position, or is it a hybrid position? Are they available to work remote? If we come to that again, we don't know that we'll come to that. And if that's a non-negotiable for you and you need that in your company, you need to be asking those questions. Do they have a space? All of those things. But you need to decide for the position itself, what exactly are the non-negotiables? What are the things that you cannot live without? And what are the things that you can bend? Some of the things that you may be able to bend a little bit on is, depending on, the hour structure, for instance, if they, you can work outside of a 9 to 5, if they can work, 7 to 2 or whatever the hours may be, that may be flexible for you. So you may be able to say, you have flexible hours, But if you have a structured hour and it's non-negotiable, your business is open from 8 to 5 and they need to be in their job seat from 8 to 5, then you need to put that on the non-negotiables and definitely run that through the screening questions.
Yes. And ours is a very easy one that comes to mind when we talk about that and what to put on there. But this also is about customizing it for what is so important for your organization and what those requirements are. And, with remote work, maybe it is a hybrid situation, but they are required to be in the office every Monday, 9 to 2, for example. Then let's put that on there so that it's very clearly communicated.
Or if
And
they'll
then-
ever be required to be front facing with the camera on, right? Because
Mhm.
that's a big sticking point for me. I feel like a virtual meeting is just like any other meeting, and you better show up with your camera on. You wouldn't walk into my office with a bag over your head, so don't show up with your camera off. And so if I was hiring right now for a remote position, that would be a requirement for me. Are you comfortable in a online meeting with your camera on? And is that available to you at all times? Because if it's not, I'm not dealing with you. I need to see your face if I'm having a meeting with you.
Yep. So obviously those non-negotiables super high of importance on the list, and take time to figure out what that is at your job that is so important that you have to do. And then as you're working through other screening questions, we can get into things that are not as not as negotiable, but it's other things that are very easy for them to give yes or no answers to, or you could rate things. So some other examples could be, do you have experience working for a virtual team if you're hiring for a remote position? Some people don't have experience with that. And while those things can be learned, somebody who is comfortable meeting virtually and working virtually and has already established that is a great skill set that you take into it. Because if someone who has never done that, there's another hurdle to get over.
Yeah, that might be the tiebreaker, right? So if everybody's equal everywhere else and one person hasn't worked virtually and one person has, just having that screening question, you may say, okay, let's interview this person first because this person doesn't have that little bit of experience that's going to cost us extra time and energy to interview, to bring them up to speed. So that simple question may be a tiebreaker when you're looking at resumes.
And then one great thing that you can do on a screening questions is this, to have them rate their proficiency with whatever programs you need them to use. If it's an office job or if it's more of a technical job, what kind of software or technology or tools that are required to use. And it doesn't necessarily mean that all these are a requirement, but you can give them on a scale of 1 to 10, never being used to very proficient, to rate how they are with Google Docs, Google Sheets, Basecamp, Slack, Teams, whatever it is that your company uses. And while, will everyone be 100% truthful in that? And maybe that's more of a opinion of how they are. It will definitely give you a good idea of how proficient they are at some things. The other part of this is when you get these results back and you're going through and you're looking for them, one of our biggest red flags that we always look for and advise other people to look for is if you list 5 to 8 software types that they need to rate themselves on, and they get 10s on everything, that's probably a red flag. Is everyone really an expert? No, I'm a whiz at a lot of this stuff. I wouldn't even say that I'm an expert. I wouldn't rate myself a 10. I've got Google capacities to go figure out what I need to do on things, but it happens that we're not, unless you are deep into software, you're most likely not a 10. So look for those red flags on how things come back. It just seems like everything's perfect and they say that they know how to do everything. It's like, we're going to need to ask some more questions. That's where they can prove themselves once you get to a skills assessment part.
Yeah. And it's okay for them to have a 10 on 1 or 2, right? Because
Absolutely.
ideally, if you're if you were looking at Amanda and I's screening questions, she would probably have a 10 on Excel and I would have a 10 on a word processing document, right? Because those are our skill sets. She's more of a numbers spreadsheet girl, and it's okay if she was to put a 10 there because that's a strength for her. Now, if she had 10s across the board on everything, that would be a red flag. Same with me. If I had a 10 in an Excel spreadsheet, you should run, right? Because I'm not proficient. Now, can I use it? Can I figure out formulas? Can I Google it and figure it out? Absolutely. But I'm not going to put myself as a 10 as proficient in that area because I'm just not. And so You want to look for that. They should have some strong suits. They should rank higher on some things than others, even on those other, specific softwares like Slack and Basecamp and those types of things. Maybe they have a 0 because they've never heard of it or never had the opportunity to use it, but maybe on another one they have a 5, and maybe on another one, there should be that differential in there showing where their strong suits are.
Yes. So another part, and this goes back to some of the non-negotiables, and we're big on this, and we've got some blogs out there about it, and we talk about it in the books, is we should be listing the pay rate in our job descriptions. And it is required in some places now, but even if it's not required, we absolutely advise you to do so. And then add it to the screening questions. It's going to save everyone time. So if it's an hourly, say, do you understand that this is the starting hourly rate for this position? Or are you comfortable with the salary range for this position? Put it up there again, because one of the top things of the whole recruitment and interview process is people get to the end and then they talk about salary. And absolutely, that is a time to negotiate. But if that's the first time that it's been talked about and someone's gone through this entire process and what you can offer, even your best, is nowhere close to what they require, then you've wasted everyone's time.
Including your own,
Yes.
Which is huge. You don't want to waste your own time.
Do not waste your own time. So you can talk about those types of things as well. And then, this is a great time to be like, how many years experience do you have in a role, and give them the options. And also have them list their references in this part. So that way it's in the spreadsheet, and that's a time saver for you. Some people might say, well, I listed that on a cover letter, or I listed that on a resume. And I get that they don't want to be repetitive, but we're talking about a few lines. We're not talking about retyping their resume and having to completely fill it out again. But if they will list their professional relationships there, another red flag, I would say, and we come across this at times, and there's people who refuse to do it or say, check resume. And it's like, we're talking about.
I've been guilty of that in the past. Check resume. I've been guilty because I'm like, gave it to you. But when I was on the hiring side of it, and you understand the proficiency and efficiency in that or the efficiency, it's right there. And now you're providing. First of all, it shows you can follow the rules, which is probably why I didn't do it the first time, right? Because I'm not a rule follower. So it shows you can follow the rules. It shows that you understand efficiency, just following that simple thing. Now, here's a warning on screening questions, because we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but this is where people can start getting carried away and they can start asking all these questions. And for someone like myself, who, first of all, I'm not a rule filer, I don't want to, sit here and fill out a whole questionnaire about a job that I'm applying for. I provided you a resume. Now let's get on with it, right? So ask questions that expand on the information that's already been given. Ask questions that are going to give you more information that's already been given. You understand that they served in these positions, but now you're asking the question, how many years did you serve in this role? You're asking bigger questions. And the screening questions, yes, you can have a set screening questions for your entire company, but we really suggest that you do it per role. Yes. And as that role changes and morphs, that you change the skill questions, screening questions, because if you don't change the screening questions after each hiring and all of those, you're not really using them for what you want to be using them for, right? You should be learning and using. Now, once you kind of get in a rhythm, it's a lot easier, but it takes a few seconds to fill out a Google form and create these screening questions. We give you samples. You can tweak them to your own company stuff. We even give you, and Amanda hasn't talked about this yet, but we even give you the email samples that you're going to send to these people. So you have it all. It's like right there.
Yeah. And I was just getting ready to share my screen and show this as we were talking about it. This is in the downloadable tools, and this is just an example. And some people still do paper forms. You might have people who physically come into your office to fill things out. You might mail it to them. Obviously, there are more tech savvy ways that you can do this, but the questions are the same. It's the same concept. So here's an example for you. So if you're looking to incorporate this into your hiring process, take this, work with your team, some of you may be small businesses and just looking to hire for the first time. So find that one person who you can bounce ideas off of. This is an example of some, and then rework it so it works for you. And as you do that, then you need to go through and add whatever changes or additions you may make. And we've got another sheet here for you to do that. What non-negotiables will be included? So we remind you to look at those items again. And then after you're finished, who's going to write the responses? Be sure that you figure that out. So it's the same person who goes through and looks at like, oh, they said no on non-negotiables. We'll go ahead and put them in the no pile. These, they all look like they can move on to the next step. So we'll move them to the yeses. And then, and this is so important, and this is a common theme in all of our books, is about communication. And that's not just with your team, it is with the candidates. And we want to be sure that we're communicating with them and don't just leave them hanging. So we've even got an example script here on if they did move to the next round, and we've got your no's so that you can just copy this, tweak it to fit your company's need, whatever is applicable to the candidate, and you can send it from there. And that way,
And we also have a space at the top of that, Amanda, where you actually ask who's going to handle the communication, right? So the person who grades the responses may not be the person who emails these emails back out to the people. So you want to make sure you document who is it in our team that's doing this? Because if you just assume that the person who does the responses is going to be doing it, they may not, right? And so you want to make sure that, maybe it is the same person, maybe it's all you, maybe it's different people, but just having that to fill in the blanks and do that with is so important. I love that you shared the example on screen so people could see it. And that is, obviously our screening questions for a specific role we talk about in the book, and it's geared, it's got our company name and all of that. So you would want to tweak it, but you could take those specific questions, go over to a Google form, open it up, retype them in and tweak them right there. And then you now have it digitally. And that's the way we actually do our screening, is all through digitally, because we want it to come back to us in a nice, efficient spreadsheet where we can just easily compare answers and look across the board versus having to compare paper to paper to paper. And so just because we gave it to you in that format doesn't mean that that's the way we use it. But if you're still old school paper style and you want, someone fills an application out and you're giving them back this, or you're sending it in a PDF to them to fill out, you can certainly do that. But we just recommend it in a spreadsheet so that in a Google form that gets converted over, which if you're not familiar with, it's literally a click of a button, it forms it into a spreadsheet. And now you're comparing answers for each of your candidates one by, it's really easy. Then you can go through and just strike out the ones that are no's, and then you can inform your person, whoever that is that's communicating, go through, look at the spreadsheet, all the no's, go ahead and communicate that with them. So it's really efficient and all there for you. So I'm not sure how many people we have on live watching us right now, but if you are live with us, go ahead and type in the comments any questions you have so far, or about the hiring process, about the screening questions. Type in those questions. And then if you're watching the replay, just let us know replay, and go ahead and drop your questions as well. We'll be happy to circle back and answer those for you.
Yes, definitely, for those who are watching this on replay, because I know not everyone is available at this specific hour of the day, and that's why we do the replays. And we absolutely will get notification if those pop back up in the comments, and we will definitely come back and answer them, and other people can still read what those questions are, which is beneficial. Definitely. And speaking of efficiency, that is the entire point. Like, we want to hire good people, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it efficiently. And this is why we do screening questions. When you have this huge applicant pool, what is the most efficient way to narrow the pool? And that's not having interviews with everybody at all. Like, that is so time consuming. You've got to make sure you are narrowing it down to see if someone qualifies enough for your time.
Well, and here's the other thing, Amanda, right? So maybe you're the business owner watching this and you're paying an HR person. If they're not using this tool, you need to buy this book, you need to grab this replay, and you need to give it to them and say, do this from now on. Because if you're paying that person by the hour, they're wasting your money, right?
Even if you're paying them salary, they need to be doing something else.
Exactly. You're wasting your money. You've got to, these processes are here to streamline the whole process. And each of the tools is designed for efficiency, and not just to save your company money and but to save the applicants, right? If you're just a revolving door of applicants and you're just doing, it's such a waste of time for everyone. And you don't want to be known as that company, right? Well, yeah, they interview 1,000 people, but they only hire one. You know, you don't want to be that person either. So make sure that the system is set up. But talk to, if you are a small business that has an HR person, or you're looking to dedicate an HR, provide these tools for them and let them know, this is the process I want you to follow. Let's talk it through. If you need my help, let's set up these screening questions, because I want it to be an efficient process. I don't want you to interview 25 people for a job that we really should have only interviewed 5. Really talk it through with them and save yourself some money, because you don't need to be paying someone to be looking through 1,000 resumes. You don't need to be paying someone to interview people that don't need to be interviewed. Nobody needs that.
No, there's no sense in taking time to schedule interviews and sit through interviews with someone who doesn't meet your non-negotiables. So
Absolutely.
let's establish that. Let's weed it out. And then let's get to looking at things that are not on the non-negotiable list, but you can rank them. You can, these people say their skills are here. These people say their skills are there. And then even the next step is skills assessments that you would then move them into. And that's something we talk about more in depth in the book. And there's other blogs that we have out there talking about how to do that in an efficient way that also isn't taking hours and hours of the candidate's time. Because you still want it to be, a skills assessment should take no more time than an interview should. You don't want it to take any more time of theirs, because
it should be a quick thing that they could fill out in 5 or 10 minutes. One of the questions that is on our skills assessment, our screening questions that we talked about earlier, was the core values question. Yes. And I want to come back to this because I think it's so important. We're talking about non-negotiables, and core values is we ask people, first of all, we provide them on the job description. We state what our core values are. So we're circling back and asking them, do they feel like they fit, that they agree? Was there one that stood out to them? Something about those core values, so that they're acknowledging, maybe which core value resonated with you, something along those lines. So they're acknowledging that they read them, because they might weed themselves out if they're understanding that, oh, wait, these people were serious about that. They value integrity and honesty. And maybe I don't need to work for these people because that's not me. I'm a salesperson and I want to go be, selling and sliming everywhere, maybe that's them and they're not a fit for your company because that's not the way your company sells. You've got to put your core values out there and let them self-select, right? Get on out if they're not. And then it's also going to give you an idea of which core value is resonating with people, what's drawing people to our company, and what do we need to focus on? Maybe we need to focus on some of the other ones or strengthen those in our company. So it'll really give you an idea, but if you don't have your core values, you need to go back and set those up. First of all, get your core values, what really matters to your company, and then what's really happening in your company, right? It's not just a thought, but it's what you really live and breathe and do. And then, one of ours is finding joy in the pursuits. We're joy of pursuit. That's what we want to do. We want the processes to be joyful. And so if we're not doing that, if it's not a joyful process, we're trying to figure out why isn't it joyful and what can we do about it? And we talk about that at our quarterly meetings. What can we do to make this more joyful? I'm not enjoying this anymore and we want to change something. And so use those core values and really ask the questions that matter, because it'll help you. And that's going to affect your culture. If you bring someone in that's not a match, they may be the strongest candidate. Otherwise, everything else is fantastic, but they're not a core values match. They're going to affect your culture in your workplace. And that's huge.
Yes. And I think, and we talk so much about culture in all of our books, in everything that we do when we consult. It is very much about culture. And culture, it's for companies that haven't established what are their core values, and especially companies that are startups and small businesses that are just getting their feet under them and figuring out, a lot of times that's hard for them to put their finger on. And it's a lot easier to say, I need someone who knows how to use this software, and I need someone who's comfortable making sales calls. And those things are very important, but it's so critical for small businesses to take the time to really figure out what their culture is. What do they want it to be? What are their core values? Because once you do this, you incorporate it into daily activities for for your team. And then you also turn it into, how do you treat your clients? How do you recruit? And once you start including it into the recruiting process, it's a game changer. And I'll have to go look and find, there's a blog, I'll post that in the comments as well, that specifically talks about how to integrate your core values into your hiring process. And a lot of that's what Brenda just mentioned a few minutes ago, about having a question on your screening part about it, just to reference it, that this is something we highly value. And some people may self-select out when they see that. Other people may lean in. The right person who will meet your core values and have similar core values just for how they do their life, if they see that those are your company's core values and that they have a connection with that, they're going to lean in. And that's the point. That's what you want. That's how you hire excellence, because you've got to
Absolutely.
explain to them, this is what we're looking for. And if you can't explain that in a job description and in screening questions and how you ask questions during interview, if you can't articulate it, then the right person doesn't know it's the right fit for them, because that you've got to be able to hear it and
Absolutely.
for them to be able to respond to it.
So we have a question coming in from Irina. She says, I would love to hear if you can give a suggestion on how to narrow down the pool without doing interviews, but the position doesn't have any required specific qualification because it's a junior level position. So if you could tell us more about what the position is, that would be probably helpful, Irina. But I think that almost all positions are going to have some kind of requirement, right? So is there a dress code requirement? Is there
What are the work hours? Is it full-time versus part-time? Especially for a junior position, is it something, if it's, let's say it's a part-time position, they need to know the understanding that it will be a minimum of a certain amount of hours, but also a maximum amount of hours, so that they're not counting on, well, I know I've got to make this amount per hour for 30 hours to pay my bills, but the position's only 20 hours, then that needs to be said there.
Yeah. Another one would be whether they're willing to grow in the company, right? If they, maybe you could ask them if it's a junior level position, someone who's maybe just out of high school or junior college, maybe do they plan to return to school? Are they looking for a company to grow with? Questions like that, because that's going to give you some ideas on, I remember I was on the other side of this coaching an interviewee, and I said, what is one of the reasons why you want to work for this company? And she's like, oh, I think it'll be a great stepping stone for blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, no, we don't say that. No company wants to hire somebody to be their. I would not want to be your stepping stone. I'm hiring you. I'm investing in you. I want you to come and stay here at my company and grow up with me. Right. And so that may be a question you can just put in there is, are you looking for a company to grow with? And they would yes or no, and they may say no, and then that gives you an idea. And maybe you're not looking to keep people long term. Maybe your position is something that you're just turning over those high school kids as they, I think of our local grocery store here. Every high schooler, I live in a small town, and every high schooler, my daughter did, my son, they all work at the grocery store at one point, and it's just, they know those people are probably not going to stick around. Now, some of them do, some of them have grown up and, now work as management in the different departments of the store. But for the most part, it's a high turnover position, and the company is aware of that. And so they're just looking to get, their more important questions are you flexible? Are there any outside curricular activities that would affect your work hours? Questions like that, because if they're involved in sports, they may not be able to work after school. They may, so looking at the different questions that affect the position and ask about those questions, that may be helpful for you.
Yes. And yeah, Arena, if you can put any more details, we'll definitely get more specific. Obviously with junior level, you don't expect anyone to be an expert at anything, but do they need to use any type of software, or do they consider themselves tech savvy to learn new software? How do they rank themselves with communication? Do they want to, are they someone who wants to learn, wants to grow? Some of that goes to, is this considered a stepping stone for them, or they really want to stay with the company and grow with the company? Do, you know, there's some other nuances that you can get in there, but
Yeah, I think the communication question is huge, Amanda, because we're huge on that in our company. And just asking, which way do you prefer to communicate with other adults or other, whatever the job description is, right? Which way do you prefer to communicating in person and give them options, right? Text, voicemail, it'll give you an idea, especially if it's a younger person hiring, right? If they're like text, they only want to communicate during text, or if they, this has got to be a multiple choice so they can pick, or a checkbox so they can pick all the ones that they're comfortable with, but they may just put text, and it may be a position where they're going to have to pick up the phone and call people. That's not going to work if they're not comfortable picking up the phone and calling people. I mean, we have to think about the difference in generation that we're working with. It is a completely different generation. I mean, my sister and I, we can talk on the phone for 3-4 hours at a time, no problem. My children, they don't do that. They don't talk on the phone for hours at a time like that. Now, my son and my older daughter can, because they just like to talk a lot. They get it honest. Younger daughter, she would prefer just to send a quick text and be done, and then an occasional FaceTime. But it really depends on their personality and what the job requires, right? And so asking questions about how they prefer to communicate with other people is important. You can even, how do you communicate best with your friends? It's going to give you an idea. Do they like to talk to people? Do they not like to talk to people? It just really depends on the age and the person that you're looking at bringing into that position.
Yes. And I think maybe some general questions, and obviously depends on the type of role. Ask them, what do they think an appropriate time frame is for responding to a work email?
It's a great question.
And that varies by company. Some, depending on the urgency, is that the main way that communication's handled internally with the company, then it may be that during business hours, we expect you to respond to emails within 2 to 3 hours. Or it may be a company that says, as long as you get to it within 24 business hours, that's fine. Engage that on how your company does things, and then ask them what they think is appropriate. You don't necessarily give them what the expectation is, but ask them what they think is appropriate. And you can see kind of what is their level of urgency when they're working with other people, and how would they prioritize that type of work. And maybe that's another part, is have them look at what their job is in that junior role, come up with 4 or 5 things that would normally happen on a day that they're working. Ask them to rank those in importance of what they think it is, just knowing what they know from the job description. And that can kind of give you an idea of how their mind works and how they would normally behave in that situation. And they're probably not going to get it 100% as to what you would want, but you can also see if, is communication always at the end? Is it at the top? And you can figure out what you can work with there or what you can't work with. Another really simple one actually is how soon do you need someone to start? Because if this is a person, if the person who is applying already has a job, but you need someone to start soon, are they available to start within a day of an offer, within a week, within 2 weeks, within a month? So that's a very
after
easy
they
one.
graduate,
And we've gotten some very interesting responses on some of those over the years, as we have put that one out there. That's a pretty standard one that we keep on the list, because if it's, average 2 weeks is good. Allow them, give 2 weeks notice, which is good and respectable. And hopefully they have enough of a good relationship with their current employer that they can give 2 weeks notice, and that they want to give 2 weeks notice. That doesn't always happen, but that's usually a good foot to step on with how we do that. So if they can start within 2 weeks, great. If it's someone that says, well, no, I've got to give notice, and then I have a vacation planned, and then there's the school thing, whatever it may be, and it's a month before they can start, can you wait a month? If
are they worth waiting for?
Are they worth waiting for? And that might help you narrow some of those down as well.
Yeah, I think asking too, you could almost think about like old school word problems, right? In school, but give them a word problem. Give them, say, okay, if I'm assuming, let's just assume this retail store, and they're coming in, or whatever office, and it's a customer complaint. How would you respond to this customer complaint? Give them a customer complaint and let them solve it. I'll tell you, I recently ordered a t-shirt online, and they sent me an email to give a review, and I gave a negative review because I had a negative experience, and they responded like that. I got an email back. It said, if you do this, 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 it will fix your problem. And it did. I was so impressed with their customer service. So give them a little scenario. How would you handle if whatever your job function is, how would you handle this situation? How would you handle it if the boss gave you a big project at the last minute? How would you handle, whatever those kind of things are, to see how they respond to things, right? How do they respond in an emergency? How do they respond under pressure or in a crisis? I think those are important questions. Maybe something about, what do you consider office appropriate dress? What do you consider office appropriate? If it's an office outfit, right? They need to come sit in an office with you on a daily basis, and you're not a jeans company, you're not a, yoga pants company, then they need to be aware of that. And one of the ways you can find out how they feel about that is just ask them, what do you feel like is, appropriate office attire? What do you consider as office, casual Friday? If they put, shorts and a t-shirt, well, maybe if you work at Schlitterbahn, but probably not if you work at our office, right? So you just need to put some questions out there. Now, you do have to be careful because you don't want to, start asking random weird questions. But if it pertains to your job and it really would help you focus in on, does this person think in the business mindset that I need them for this position? That's what you're looking for.
And you begin to see their critical thinking skills. Now, this isn't a deep dive by any means, because you don't want them writing paragraphs when it comes to screening questions, but it can give you a glimpse of how that is. And let's say written communication is important for whatever this role is. Will they be emailing internally, externally with clients? Do they use capitalization and punctuation in their responses? There's some really small things you can pick up on by asking other questions. And that's, an easy thing to put in there without even asking what the question is. You're observing how they respond. And that also goes to the C resume instead of putting their references. And that will absolutely help you screen out some of those things. And you could also ask them to describe their ideal workday. And that'll give you a glimpse into their mindset. Does it include collaborating, or is their ideal workday to be in the cubicle by themselves without being bothered? And that is ideal depending on the position maybe. Or if they need to be a part of a team and do teamwork, and that's so heavily focused, but their ideal workday doesn't mention anything about collaboration, then they may need to go a little bit further down on the list if you're ranking your candidates.
Yeah. Or can they even articulate it? And that really goes back to, if they're trying to communicate with anyone inside of your office or outside of your office, if they can't communicate it, if they can't spell correctly, if they can't use proper punctuation and all of that in their communication back to you on a simple question about their ideal work day, they're probably going to struggle to communicate on other things.
Yes.
Questions.
And this is where, if you're struggling still to come up with questions, that we've kind of thrown a million ones of options out there on what you can come up with, go back to your job description. What do you list in the job description? And we have sample job descriptions in our book as well that you can go and look at. That will give you, there's the negotiable section, and then like the preferred skill set, like go back to those specific things that you say, the ideal candidate for this position, XYZ. So pull that XYZ and put it into your screening questions. And this is also a way to make sure that they read the job description, they understand the job description, and they understand what's expected, because this is back to communication. We cannot have expectations of how they're going to perform the job if we don't communicate what the job actually looks like. And then the screening questions is a follow-up to that communication, to making sure that they read the job description, that they're understanding what's being asked of them if they were to be hired.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the way that they answer those questions is so important. I love using the job description because that's what you're focusing in on, right? So just go back to what you've already created, what you hopefully focused in on to begin with. How is this person solving this problem in our company, filling this hole, whatever that is, and then start expanding on that with the questions. And they don't have to be long. The screening questions, you can ask three questions. It can be that short. You can ask, up to, I don't, what would you say? 10 probably is the max. I don't know how many
I think
If they're yes or no, you want to switch it up too, right? You want yes or no's, but you want something where there's something, so that you can see if can they spell, can they type, can they, you want to put something in there where they're actually having to type text in. But yes or no, check boxes. You can vary up the
choice,
questions. But
ranking.
this isn't one of those, if you've ever been to like a hiring company where they're hiring, placing an employment placement company. And I think we have a viewer on that actually is a talent acquisition. So that's kind of what he does, right? He's pulling in, screening a lot of candidates and then helping. If you've ever been to one of those type of places, they screen. That is their job. They're having people take tests on Excel, take tests on Google, take tests on, that's their job. This is not what we're doing here. This is not that in depth. This is very high level, but it's still very focused on that specific job description, that specific role that you're hiring for. We're not going to ask, this is not the time. They're not taking an SAT, right? This is not that time. So just keep them short, succinct to the job specifically, to that role.
Yep.
I think one of the biggest ones for the junior position is, are they looking to grow with the company?
Yeah. So definitely as far as length, I mean, if you go more than 10, then the majority of them need to be easy yes and no questions. But absolutely put something in there that is open-ended. And you don't have to ask them to write a book. I mean, and even state that in there, what the expectations are. Like, can you explain in 2 to 3 sentences so that you're not putting pressure on them to do a lot? Because you still want to be realistic in your expectations. This is just the first round and you're just trying to weed people out essentially. And by doing screening questions, you're already weeding people out. Because if you get 100 resumes and let's say all of them are decent enough to send screening questions to, and you send out 100 people the screening questions, you will not get 100 back. So just the act of asking them to do screening questions will already have some people self-select out. If they're not willing to put forth the effort to answer something that will take less than 10 minutes, then are they worth the effort to interview? No, they're not. Then they're not the ideal fit. And this is where it's not just what the screening question is. You're looking at how they answer the screening questions, that they answer them. Can they spell, those kind of things? If it's important to the role, it may not be. And then another one that's really one is if you have a question that's a yes or no question, but you say in the question, if your answer is yes. So one
expand,
example, one example we have in the book, the question was yes or no, do you have experience with event planning? If yes, what size of events have you worked with? But then does the person come back and just answer yes? So they didn't pay attention to the detail of the follow-up part of if it's a yes. So it doesn't even necessarily matter what the question is and what the answer is that they didn't even follow the instructions on the question.
Yeah. So they lack attention to detail. So if that's important to your role, which as an event planner, it would be, then probably not a fit for your company.
Yep.
Yeah. And even how they communicate back and forth in the email, right? So you're emailing them the screening questions and they're going to complete them. And then they're going to, if you're doing a Google form, they're going to complete them and you're going to get them back. So did they just do that? Or did they actually send you back an email and say, I've completed the screening questions, and they've communicated back to you. So just knowing the difference, how are they taking the extra step to communicate with you? Or are they just filling out the form and being done? And you're having to, get a notification from Google that it got done. How they communicate in the back and forth of that makes a lot of difference as well. I always teach candidates to follow up with a job interview. It's the same with the screening questions. If you send screening questions, they've done them, and you don't do your job and send them the yes or no back, right? That we gave you the answers we gave you there. If you don't do your job and send those back to them, hopefully the ideal client or the ideal candidate is going to be emailing you and following up and saying, I hope you received my screening questions. I haven't heard back from you, blah, 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 blah. So in that communication back and forth, it really says a lot about a candidate. So hopefully you're looking at the big picture, right? You're not just seeing what's on the paper, what's on their resume. We like to try to pull that and see what their actions are behind what they say they're actually capable of.
Yes, it's definitely, we've got to look at more than just what's at surface level.
Yeah. I mean, anybody can say on their job description, they're great at communication.
Yes.
But can they actually do it when the time comes? Yeah.
Definitely. And that's where in the next step of this, which was not the topic for today, but after this, if you get screening questions, you take out those that are no's, and then you've got a smaller pool of candidates for the yeses. And after that, then you do skills assessments. And that's where you give them the opportunity to back up what they said. If they said they were a 10 on certain softwares, develop something so that they can prove that they are a 10. And that may come to the point that they're like, oh, I'm not a 10 on that. I'm not a 10 on all of these things. And they realize that they can't prove it. And then a lot of times they will self-select out at that point.
Mhm.
So it's
And
all,
if you need more on that, since that's not the topic of today, grab the book for one. You can also dive into our course that we have. It's Amanda will drop this stuff, I'm sure, if she hasn't already, but we have a very affordable course. It's less than $200, and it'll walk you through the entire series of 4 books. Or if you just want the hiring process with those things in it, you can purchase that as a one-off course for like $50, I think. So less than 50. So if you do want to go to the next step and know the next step after this today specifically, you can certainly grab those. If you're looking for a full encompassing, like I mentioned earlier, if you're hiring somebody to sit in the seat, or you're molding somebody to sit in the seat, it's worth the investment for the course, whether it's one of the 4 courses or the bundle of all 4. It's worth the investment to get it and get them in there and set them up for success. It's going to
yes,
save you so much money in the long run.
the full course, which covers all 4 parts of the journey, is $129.99. And that's very affordable for people who are needing to revamp their employee journey process. It's also a great investment for small companies. And a big reason that we do this and do the consulting we do is the statistics, and I've lived it multiple times, which is actually the motivation for me writing these books, is small businesses often do not have a dedicated HR person. It is the finance person or the owner or the ops manager who's thrown into that position without any proper training, because that's not top of the list on hiring positions when you're trying to grow from a startup. So this will give you all the information you need to start and have really robust hiring and recruiting, but then it doesn't stop there. Let's get them onboarded well. So we've spent all of this time recruiting the right person. We want them to stay. So how do
Yes.
we onboard them well and incorporate them into our culture so that they want to be here? And then the next one goes into retention. And then the last one does go into exit, which is inevitable. And it may be that people leave on good terms, but we still need to be sure that we're handling their exits properly. So again, the course covers all 4.
It covers all 4. And this is really for, small businesses, but it's really for entrepreneurs too, because let's just be honest, just because you have a great you understand how to manage people or lead people well. And we see this a lot in small businesses, that the CEO, they don't know how to do job interviews. They don't know what questions you can ask or not ask. They have no idea what screening questions are or want to even figure them out. And so by having these tools in place as an entrepreneur, as a visionary, and equipping the right person on your team, if you're building a team, or if you're not building a team and you need a consultation, you need someone to come alongside you and help you to build this team, that's what we're here for. So you can actually sit down with Amanda one-on-one and get a consultation on all of this. She can build out your process for you. The other thing is,
We can
if you
help
have a
develop
small
your
team,
questions. That's where,
absolutely.
we had the question earlier about what kind of questions. If we can do a consultation, and it's a great opportunity. It's like, let's start with your job description and really dig and let's make sure that that's refined well. And then I can help you develop, this is what your screening questions are going to look like. I can help you develop what skills assessments you need to do. And then you can take it back to just yourself or just your admin assistant that you may have if you're just getting started, and then you can implement it. It's just that I can help you get over that hump to create the tools that are right for your company.
Absolutely. Or you can bring her into your company if you do have a small company and you want to implement any of the 4 processes that we talk about in the series. You can bring her in and she can walk through those processes with the appropriate people on your team. Hold a workshop for your company and teach them these HR strategies. We believe that HR is not just for HR affects the entire company, and that when the entire company is on board and supports the HR function, resources, right? And we're all responsible for the resources in our companies. And when you have that support across the board of your company, it just makes a world of difference. So whether it's a one-on-one you need, or you need someone to come in and do some training with your people, or you just want to sit back and watch the course on your own time, we have some tools available for you. So I think we're at the top of the hour.
We are. So
wrap it up. You want to talk about what to expect next month for them?
All of those links that Britta just mentioned are in the comments, and you can obviously find them on our website or reach out to us if you had specific questions on, you're not sure what you need, and we just need to have an email conversation to figure out which best way to direct you to do that. But the easiest place is to start with the books, and we've got the course, and we can absolutely do consultation to really develop things just for your company. So coming up next is in February, our next workshop in this series, as we work through the employee journey with you, is going to talk about onboarding. We're going to talk about onboarding strategies and how mentorship programs coupled with a good onboarding strategy will really help you retain those new hires. So hopefully this one has boosted to help you hire the right person. And then next month, we're going to talk about how to onboard them well so that they continue with your company.
Yep. So if you've stumbled upon this viewing, be sure to register, so you'll get registered for the tools from this one in the links below, and then you'll get a reminder of the next one coming up and the tools for the next one as well.
Yes. So if you're joining us late, since there was a little delay for us, I know some people left and came back, the replay will be sent out, and all the tools are in that too. So if you came late and you didn't get the email before this started and you're like, I don't have the tools, it's coming in an email that'll be resent out to you. And then register for our next one. We'll send out reminders and connect with everybody, and it'll be the same format and here on LinkedIn, so you can watch it live or at your convenience. So thank you to everybody who showed up today.
Absolutely.
And those of you that are watching the replay, we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.